Sticks and stones from Skull and Bones, but don't let name calling ever hurt you. That's what this one's going to be all about. So, in the last video we covered the name and how it can and will be used against you. And some of what we're going to cover here will be more spiritual self-defense that may or may not be applicable in a court of law. Anybody out there, you better believe this is one of the most magical books ever published. And the terms in here will teach you about very commonplace magical terminology, fundamental. So, name calling. When they presume to have command over your name, over your identification, you better believe you are moving into very volatile territory, that you are about to expose yourself, and there is nothing more vulnerable than your identity. This is psychological, and this is also dealing with mentalism. We are dealing with mentalism, fundamentals of mentalism. So, up here I wrote name calling. That's kind of the basis of what we're going to cover here. We have constitutionally the freedom of association. This comes in the First Amendment. There's a reason it's the First Amendment. You know, the right to speak, the right to congregate, the right to address our grievances, and the freedom of association. We have the right to move around, and the right to associate with who we want and who we don't want. And that means when somebody gives you a title, sir, or when they give you a position, move you into a position, put you in a corner, such as the defendant, you have the freedom to associate with that presumption. And there are many things that I hope to show that are good mental fortifications against being associated with vulnerable positions. You know, Mona Lisa, the letters Mona Lisa are rearrangeable. They're an anagram for alias nom, an alias name. That's not really who she is. That's the identity she was given in the graven image of her that was captured in a state, in stasis, in a statue. She was frozen in time. Those are graven images, and she used an alias name to protect her true identity so she could go on with her life and live in mystery in the private side. So here's some good examples of the freedom to associate, and the freedom to keep your name private, and the freedom to never identify as a pejorative. That's a practice that I don't often have to use, but I keep it in my mentality for spiritual self-defense purposes. One good example, the term black and the term white. When they're capitalized, a black person, a white person, when they're capitalized, you're dealing with a brand name. It's like a trademark. It's very much like a trademark. This is a term that is capitalized because it is captured. It has somebody has command over that concept, and it's on you. It's your mistake if you take it personal. If somebody says, I hate white people, and it's got that capital letter on it, that doesn't have to mean you personally. It's a group that you have freedom of association. So I wrote down one of my favorite lines. I love to say this. I never identify as pejoratives. And I recommend that you never identify as any pejoratives. It's a good way to stay pretty bulletproof. We have the freedom from self-incrimination. That's the Fifth Amendment. That's the pentagram That's the 5. That's the stop sign. That's indicating halting, to halt. The entire process, the entire conversation stops when you refuse to self-incriminate, and that keeps them in the public. Officers are public servants. They are in the public, and engaging with them in any way whatsoever, giving them joinder with your identification, any of that drags you into the public purview. And so remaining behind your amendments, your rights, that Fifth Amendment, keeps you on the private side. It keeps them on the public side. They're in the public. You're back here on the private. Just a quick lesson. The term belligerent, Proclamation 2039 and Proclamation 2040 from 1933, FDR essentially announced that all citizens are enemies of the state. You should look that up, read it thoroughly. There's a lot of research and information around it. But the enemies of the state, if they take up any kind of self-defense position, they will be considered a belligerent. This is the beginning of leading people into being domestic terrorists. Very terrifying term that's getting thrown around very willy-nilly nowadays. And the definition on the battlefield of belligerent is an unorganized attack, generally an unorganized counterattack. Notice we are talking about an organ. The organ, that base word, organ, comes from this definition. An organ is a collection of tissues with a common purpose. And that sounds pretty specific to the human body, but that definition also applies and is used actively every day to define a living document. A living document, bonded, sealed paper, is an organ. It's used as an organ, a collection of tissues with a common purpose. You see how this definition is much more vague, much more open to interpretation than I ever thought when I learned this definition in school. When I was learning anatomy, I would never think that it applied to law. So here I just wanted to highlight this. Here we have Hume again. Costume, document, posthumous. We are talking about the light of the soul, humanity, your hue. Not a coincidence. Definitely some consistency going on. So, one more quick definition. Look up the word order. There's like 8 or 9 definitions to the word order. Columns, different types of columns categorically are considered different orders. There are 9 heavenly realms. In the word order refers to any of the 9 heavenly realms. It even, in the definition, is brotherhoods. The Knights Templar are mentioned in the 1961 definition. Better to have old dictionaries so that the modern day edit is not obscuring your perspective. Oftentimes the internet has quite the rose-colored glasses, shall we say. So the word order means public quiet. So when the judge slams the gavel, says order, 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 he's saying shut up, public. Well, he has command over the public. When you're in the public, it's like a tar baby. A tar baby, look up tar baby. It's basically a trap that when you touch it, it attaches to you and you cannot let go of it. And in any attempt to remove it, gets you more and more caught up into it. And the public is a tar baby. Going public puts you in quite a predicament. So staying private is the key. I'm going to do some definitions right out of Black's Law. We'll talk about public and private. You should maybe look these up yourself, spend some time. We're going to look at the fact that there is a difference in these definitions. Even right here, we have owner and ownership. Well, ownership is not as similar to owner as you would think. In fact, there are some very distinguishing factors between those two words. And one of my favorite little definitions I learned from my Black's Law is the definition of misprision. Definitely something well worth your time to look into and read what misprision is all about. So, public. Relating to, belonging to an entire community, state, or nation. So when you are public, you lose your individuality, and many presumptions are placed upon you. Open or available for all to use, share, or enjoy. Number 3, of a company having shares that are available on an open market. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about the whore of Babylon. That's going public is the tar baby. It's availing yourself to usury immediately. And private is relating or belonging to an individual as opposed to the public or the government. Number 2, of a company not having shares that are freely available in an open market. Confidential, secret. So being in the private is your sanctuary. It's being safe. And anything you can do to maintain privacy is good spiritual self-defense. This term, public, I'll save that for the next video. The open market. We're talking, that definitely relates to the wet market. I'll do a little video on that separate. Just put a little footnote in that for later. So, pro se. Pro se and propria persona are thought of as interchangeable, but they are not. They have two different definitions. They are two different words. Words have meaning. So, pro se is for oneself, on one's own behalf, without a lawyer. The defendant proceeded pro se. And pro se, that's redundant. Pro se means to proceed. It means that you accept the terms of the agreement, and many presumptions will be placed upon you. The term propria persona, Latin, in his own person, sometimes shortened to proper. Proper. This is your proper person. All of these are avoiding harmful names. Essentially what we're dealing with here is just advanced, nuanced forms of name calling. So what is the difference between a privilege and a right? A privilege is a special legal right, exemption, or immunity granted to a person or a class of persons, an exception to a duty. So I should switch this around, but privilege belongs with public, even though it looks like it has more phonetically related to private. It might be the ledge of privacy, up to the ledge, the ledger that comes right up to the boundary of privacy. Privilege is to make money on the open road, to do business in public. That is a privilege. But if you are remaining private, you have a right to privacy. You have a right to remain silent. Let's see, I don't have right pulled up, but let's move on. Ownership versus owner. Owner is one who has the right to possess, to use, to convey something. A person in whom one or more interests are vested. An owner may have complete property in the thing or may have parted with some interests in it, as by granting an easement or making a lease. So, many times we think that we're the owner of a thing, but the question still remains, do we have ownership? Let's look up ownership. The bundle of rights allowing one to use, manage, and enjoy property. And that word enjoy was absent from the definition of owner. Also, to manage. The word manage was absent from the owner. So the owner doesn't have the right to manage it, not if they don't have ownership. That word ship we'll get into on another layer. Including the right to convey it to others. So an owner can convey something, but the ownership gives you the right to convey it on to others. Ownership implies the right to possess a thing, regardless of any actual or constructive control. Ownership rights are general, permanent, and heritable. So here we have trust. We're dealing in trust law. I'm just going to move forward. I think people will get the idea of what I'm saying. So misprision. I believe that to vote is to practice misprision. Voting is in my opinion, is to conceal the crimes of the person you're voting for, to give them a pass, and to give them your volition to agree with what they've done. When in fact, you should be objecting to the very idea of these influencers being elevated to a place of power. Misprision. Concealment or non-disclosure of a serious crime by one who did not participate in the crime. So we didn't do the crime, but we're going to conceal the crimes of these influencers in our community. So I'll just close off with, sticks and stones will break your bones, and name-calling will get you put in jail if you just let them make presumptions on you. So order means public quiet, but you're not public. So when somebody places an order, they're treating you like a good, something for sale. Good means for sale. So you're not in the public, you're not obligated to remain quiet when an order is placed. You need to object. Much love, everybody. Strength.